So tell me about the first time you stepped on stage where you I got to imagine the nerves were just through the roof.
They were. I'm trying to think of what my first actual contest was. So the one that I can recall the most is the first one that I won. It was down in Virginia at Bass Pro Shops, and I went up there and they had set up a stage. It's almost kind of like, when they display their bass boats and everything. It was kind of one of those. And they had a podium, and you went up and you called, and everybody's looking at you. So it's very nerve-wracking, and it's not so much that you're standing there in front of the people. For me, it was don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up. I've practiced this for hours. I know how to do it. And what will mess you up is you hyping yourself up. If you can get past those nerves and just think to yourself, it's just another practice routine, relax, you can get through it. But if you hype yourself up, you would mess up. I'm just thinking I would get almost like a weak feeling in my wrists. So I would hold the call, and it was almost like a slight tremble. And I'm like, okay, if my hands do it, that's fine, but I can't have my throat do it, because then that's when I'm going to blow a note wrong, and then I will be pissed off.
And I got to imagine you were probably the only girl there at that time.
I was. Yep, I was at that time. The only time I ever blew against another female was when I was down in Arkansas and I did the Women's Worlds. That's the only time I blew against another female. All the other times were guys, and they were super nice to me. And like I said, I became friends with most of them. So a lot of good relationships came out of that.
How was that? Do you see the guys like after the contest like, motherfucker, she just whipped the shit out of me?
Some guys were a little pissed off, especially, and I keep using Arkansas. It's because, they thought I was a Yankee. Kind of am, but we are still below the Mason-Dixon.
We have that argument here with Josh all the time.
I don't know where to put you at.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we're below it, but we're real close. So they were really pissed off. They're like, they introduce yourself. You go out before the calling contest and you just say, like your name and where you're from. Like, hi, I'm Kaleigh Leager, Easton, Maryland. And like everybody down there is like looking around like, where the hell is Easton, Maryland? Where is Maryland, in fact? So, they're like, who's this girl from up north? And everybody else was like Searcy, Arkansas, Stuttgart, Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Everybody down there was from Arkansas. So when I rolled up there, they're like, who is this Yankee? And I also blew in the intermediate worlds, which I think I blew against 20-something guys, and I got 6. So for those 20 guys that I beat, they weren't very happy. And I get it. Some girl comes and beats you when you've been doing this. This is, I get it. I understand why they were pissed. But I did get some of those looks and some kind of like, what are you doing here? This is kind of an insiders club, not just because it's for guys, but because this is Arkansas. You know what I mean? We're the best duck callers, which they usually are. So, I got a little bit of that, but when I blew against the Women's World, they were ruthless, man. They were ruthless. They were not as accepting as guys. They were not as friendly as the guys. I really got some looks when I was blowing against the other women. I remember specifically one girl, I'm not going to say her name, but she got down, like crouched down, had her hands. She was like talking to herself, getting like real into it right before she was up and like bouncing around. Like I think she took some pre-workout or something. And she was like really in it, and she blew it. She sounded not the greatest. She gave it her best go, and she got cut after the first round, and she was like talking trash about everybody else that made it and was just saying some really nasty stuff.
She's going to be a crazy cheerleader mom one day.
Probably so. Like, Little League. Like, what the hell was that? Throwing her drink at the umpire. But I mean, everybody was really friendly down there. There was that one crazy chick, when she came out, my parents said she was dropping the F-bomb left and right, for the whole world to see, embarrassing herself. But, steep competition. And I thought I had it in the bag because I did my research, who was going to be there. For myself, judging myself, I said, okay, I think I have a pretty good chance. Well, a really, really good duck caller showed up there. She was probably in her early 20s at the time. Her name was Hallie Horton. And I had never heard her call before. I didn't even know she existed. And she came down there and she blew me out of the water. I mean, she was amazing. She sounded just as good as, the guys in the senior contest. And she won, and I got second place, and I was very upset about it. I was a sore loser. I wasn't mean or didn't do anything. I'm not going to lie. I may have shed a tear or two because I was, so pumped up about it. I was finally able to go to Arkansas. But at the end, she was somebody to really look up to because she was amazing, truly amazing.
How old were you at the time?
Let's see, 2013, I was like 15 or 16.
That's when her husband started messaging her.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta imagine is like a.
No, I was 18.
Okay.
I was 18.
So,
but I gotta imagine as like a 15 or a 16-year-old, like any time that you're on the big stage like that, and you said you shed a tear. Well, that's understandable. You're on the big stage and you got second, and you're an adolescent, so.
In a big stage.
On a big stage like that, getting second place.
Very impressive.
Very impressive. Shouldn't have been sad tears.
Go ahead.
Should have been happy tears.
It should have been, and I think what I was upset about was, we were in my family was in a financial place where it was like I knew it was probably my only shot at going, and so I was like, man, like I'm not gonna be able to come back, but I'm at the position now where I have my own job, I'm married, he and I are doing pretty well, so if I really wanted to, I could go back now. I would just have a lot of practicing to do, but there's always another day, and as you get older you kind of realize that when you're a kid and everything, you're like, you think it's the end of the world, but I got over it. She's my hat's off to her. She seriously sounded amazing. I was really impressed, and there's always going to be somebody better than you. There's always going to be things that you don't expect. It's just like you said, when you get older, you start to learn to take your licks a little bit better, and you just move on and use that as, fuel to make yourself better and to push harder.
Were you thinking about all this stuff like before you went on stage, like, oh, fuck, this is going to be my only shot down here. My parents have spent all this money on me for this trip. Like, are you thinking about that as you walk up before you even blow your first note?
I wasn't necessarily thinking about maybe all that in specifics, but I was thinking to myself, this is my shot. I know the work I put into it. I know all the people rooting for me. I know all the people who put the time in to help me. This is it, Kaleigh. Yeah. Like this is your chance. And I put so much pressure on myself. I can't remember. I didn't get cut for it. But I did. I squeaked the call on one note because I was trembling. So I was trembling inside, like my throat just like closed, and I squeaked a little note, and I was so mad at myself. That's my only regret about the whole thing, is if I blew a perfectly clean routine and still got second, which I honestly, and being honest with myself, I definitely would have still gotten second, because she was just that good. I just wish I blew just a fully clean routine so I could have, done my 110%. But things happen. I was young. I was a little freaked out, but that's not an excuse. And like I said, if I want to do it again, I can always go try again. So
that's right. Have you ever went into a store and wanted to blow a call and the guys kind of look at you like you don't know what the hell you're doing until you pick it up?
Oh yeah,
I bet that's hilarious. I bet that is hilarious.
It is. Like they like look at me and they're like, okay. And then I blow it and they're like, oh, okay. Like, you know what you're doing. And a lot of the times I'm not doing it just because I'm like, watch this. I'm like, I actually want to try it. It's a call I've never tried before. And, they just kind of look at you and they're like, they usually don't say anything. They just, they don't look as skeptical. Or they don't really look like, oh, this person's just being dumb, or, they're wasting my time. They're like, oh, okay. And then they'll just kind of, thank you, have a nice day. But they do, you kind of see that look in their eyes. You're like, yeah, okay. And then they're like,
because
okay.
you don't expect a woman or a child to be able to blow a call like you do. And I mean, I
Right,
don't mean that bad.
right.
That's just the honest to God truth. They don't see it often.
And you were both at one time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You were a child and a woman blowing these calls like this, so
Right.
you were double surprising.